One of the things that I think is important, and I do get challenged on this from time to time, is that in order for technology to really be adopted inside of an organization, a brand new emerging technology, and we'll use AI as that example, who needs to be the most familiar with it? Should it be the folks that are really using it on the front lines? Or, as I like to say, I think the leaders of the organization need to be familiar with the technology first. I'm a big believer in top-down leadership styles, and I'm a big believer in getting buy-in from leadership before pushing new ideas. Needs to be a comfort level established at the top. Once you have that buy-in, I think it's incredibly powerful for the rest of the organization.
In this episode of the Wired Garage with Pops, Michael Alshouse from Byteworks joins us to talk about what he's learning from the IT Leadership Roundtable he helps lead and why community is a cheat code for modern IT leaders. We dig into how healthcare organizations are navigating rising cyber risk, compliance pressure, and vendor complexity, and where AI and automation are actually delivering value instead of hype. He'll share stories from the field, common mistakes he sees CIOs and IT directors make, and a practical playbook for building your own peer network, even if you don't have a formal roundtable in your own backyard. Tune in if you're an IT leader, healthcare operator, or even a technologist who really just wants to talk cyber, AI, and any other leadership that you want to put to work on a Monday morning.
All right.
Yeah, go ahead, Steele.
I was going to say, with that, Michael, you mind introducing yourself? Just give the audience here just a little bit about you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys so much for having me. I've been really excited to get on your show and share a little bit with your audience. So this is a treat for me. So Mike Alshouse, I work for an IT integrator named Byteworks. I've been with the company for about 3 years. I have a good range of experience across the different verticals and industries that I work with and serve as an account manager at Byteworks. So I get a very wide range of experience and perspectives, a ton of learning from IT leaders across a wide range of experiences. So I've got a very unique perspective, which has shaped a lot of what we're going to talk about today.
Take it away, Brian.
So you become known for bringing IT leaders together through roundtables. And what problems were you trying to solve when you first started doing that, and how has that evolved?
Yeah, good question, Brian. It really started as just a forum to get people to open up. What I've noticed in my time in the technology industry is a lot of technologists are more introverted people. They're not the most naturally outgoing folks that you talk to. So one of the things I've really tried to do is find ways to open folks up and really get them to talk about their experiences, talk about their environment, talk about what's good, what's bad, what's ugly. And that's really what the roundtable started as, was a way to get folks to be more open and to share their experiences and, get people out of their own little worlds. I think it's really easy in technology to focus on just what is in front of you and what you're tasked with for that given day or for a given project. But it really started as a way of getting those barriers out of the way and to get ideas sharing and flowing. Because you guys know as well as I do, I don't think enough ideas are shared in technology, and we're not as open as we always should be.
When people like technologists who do get in the trench and get locked down in the trench and don't get outside and talk to other people, you feel alone in the world, right? You feel like you're battling this thing all by yourself, because you not only have the technology challenges that hit you, you have security challenges that hit you, you have process challenges that hit you, but you have people challenges, you have everything. It's almost like the world's against you. But if you have these roundtables, or like with me coming from the legal industry, I have ILTA, which is like a legal technology association. You have that, you feel like there's someone in here with me, right? So to me, this thing you've kind of built brings sanity to it. It brings, like a lifeline saying, wait a minute, you've done this too. What have you done? It's almost therapeutic, right? For technologists to start talking about these things and say, wait a minute, I'm on the right road, or maybe I was on the dirt road and now I can get on the concrete,
That's exactly right. And it can give you the feeling that you're not alone on an island.
Right.
I think as somebody that's very techie or, a technology leader, there's not a lot of people around you in an organization that you can always relate to. Like you work for leaders that are not technical, or you have folks on your team that are maybe technical in very specific functions and ways, but there's not a lot of other, cross-functional teammates or other teams you can go to talk about some of these things that you're working on or relate to. So in a way, it's kind of an outlet to be able to take ideas or take challenges or roadblocks and find some common ground with folks that are, like-minded. Because across the aisle in an organization, oftentimes as a technology person, you're not able to relate as well with folks.
So, what experiences have you had in your healthcare or security kind of most shaped you as a leader?
Yeah, what I would say is, there's just, especially in the healthcare realm, it's interesting you bring that one up, Brian, because I have a unique perspective, specifically in the state of Georgia, but I do work with some healthcare practices and healthcare systems outside of Georgia where, they're not all created equal. What I have found is there are healthcare systems that are based in rural parts of the country, and there are healthcare systems that are based in cities, for example. And what I have really come to appreciate is that this whole idea of idea sharing and knocking down these barriers, it's so important for those that are in areas that are not as served. So the rural parts of the country, in Georgia specifically, they don't have the same resources that a lot of folks do in the bigger cities. They don't have as many vendors that are knocking on their door and sharing ideas with them. They don't have the same funding. They don't have all the same access to technology that certain folks do in other areas, for example. So sharing knowledge is such a big thing to me, especially in healthcare and especially in areas like Georgia, where I see massive differences in what access to technology looks like in certain areas of the state.
I think something that probably leads to success for the roundtables is what you described of folks getting together, sharing information. Outside of my company, I'll typically experience that at like a convention, a conference, seminar, something like that, where it's very infrequent. Folks have to either travel or there's an expense. And so it also, just by that very nature, excludes folks who
Yeah.
could be there, have the resources, etc. Putting together these roundtables, have you noticed any themes that surface or keep resurfacing, no- either by industry or around prioritization? Kind of what things have you noticed from these roundtables, and for the different ones that you've had, any similarities there?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great question. There's a ton of similarities and common themes that just pop up constantly, you guys, during these roundtables. AI, of course, is one because it's so popular and it's, of course, the flavor of the month right now. So everybody wants to know what others are doing and how they're managing AI, how they're governing it, how they're using it, what do the specific use cases look like. But in terms of prioritization, it's another topic that comes up so regularly because in these roles as an IT leader, you're juggling a lot. There's a lot for these folks to focus on. So as you guys know, you have strategic initiatives that you're working on with your leadership team. You've got special projects that come to you from cross-functional partners. You've got day-to-day operations that have to flow. You've got, things with your network that need to be either refreshed or looked at differently, or cybersecurity concerns and changing policies on those fronts. So with so much to juggle, the prioritization topic naturally comes up the most. And what folks are really interested to hear what their peers are doing is, what are the things that you really focus on and prioritize versus the things that you outsource? As a technology group, it's really, really tough to do everything on your own. So what are the things that you really prioritize in-house versus the things that you let others focus on for you? And what I keep hearing more and more is, the more strategic the work is, the more that I want to hang on to it. I want me and my team to have control over that. Everything else, the repetitive stuff, the mundane stuff, the things that others can do for me and I can bring them in and they can do a good job, those are the things that I don't want to focus on as much and I want to have a vendor help me with, for example. I want to find a partner that I trust that can do that style work. But the strategic stuff, like that's what I really want to hang on to. And I keep hearing leaders say that they kind of sort all of that work into two different buckets. What's the strategic stuff that I want my team to focus on? What's the not as strategic stuff that I want others outside the organization to help me with?
Keeping on that roundtable side, you mentioned the events like conferences and things. If you only have those at conferences, unless you have the regular conversations, you don't feel as comfortable in those roundtables as you do in like a monthly, quarterly, biannual, semi-annual, regular standing group, where you can sit there and open up a little bit more than you would in some where you don't know anybody at the table. You don't know what they're going to respond to you with and attack you with, kind of a thing, or you don't know where they're going to take what you say and go to someone else with. You build a trust with these roundtables. And after a while, you see it start to build. It's not that first or second meeting. It's 6 months into it. You start seeing really things start to open up.
Yeah, and I think there's something to that, Brian, when you hear others around you share. I think
Right.
it creates that safe space environment. And, you're not talking to a CEO or you're not talking to somebody on your board. You're not, trying to convince somebody of anything. And I think there's so much of that in our roles of being persuasive with technology and trying to show others within our organization why it matters, what the ROI can look like, why it's important. In these groups, we're just sharing ideas. And I think that free flow, it takes all the pressure off and it does create that safe space where people can share what's on their minds.
On that same subject of the roundtable, can you think of a moment when having that free information flow and sharing, and you've got trust with all folks who are in the same boat, kind of going through it all, where an idea kind of stuck out to you or was shared, and kind of what that looked like?
Yeah, definitely. And Steele, I mentioned the AI topic is a regular one that is, of course, a hot topic and it's on everybody's mind. So naturally it comes up in the conversation a lot. But everybody is at a different stage of being comfortable with AI and how they're implementing it, how they're using it. A light bulb moment for a lot of roundtable members was when one of our members started talking about putting an AI policy into place. And really what this policy is meant to do is it's meant to give direction to the organization on how to use AI. And specifically, a lot of these policies, because what's the first step of organizations getting comfortable with AI? It's conversational AI, it's ChatGPT, or it's Microsoft Copilot, it's Claude, it's any of these applications that we're using to help with natural language. So these AI policies are drafted so that users know which tools to use and what type of language to use. So, the natural kind of pullback or, barrier to AI right now is the security. And it's how can I protect my company's info and my important data while allowing my users to use these high powered tools? Well, you got to be super careful with what you prompt into these tools. If they are ChatGPT public sources, then of course anything you put into it is out into the wild and it's at risk of being exploited. These AI policies are built to help govern that and to rein folks in so that they know what tool to use and what prompts are okay, what prompts are not okay. So that changed a lot of direction with folks on these roundtables that are trying to get into the world of AI. They realized, oh yeah, that makes a ton of sense as a starting point.
Having that transparency and that sounding board, building that trust. I mean, that's kind of what we're doing here, sharing of ideas. I can see how that model works. All right, go ahead, Brian, take
Yeah,
it away.
moving on to cybersecurity a little bit, mixing it with healthcare, and I've seen some healthcare here in Dayton. We've had some malware and some healthcare incidents with some of the hospital systems here. What are you seeing on the ground in healthcare right now? Like, how are hospitals and health systems balancing like the anxiety of ransomware, the regulatory pressures, and the day-to-day clinical operations?
Yeah, I think it starts with a mindset, Brian. I think in the last couple of years, all of a sudden, technical leaders have so much more to worry about. And all of a sudden, this world has gotten so dangerous. But I think what is important to level set yourself on is that, okay, everybody else in my same role in my world is going through the exact same thing. And this is part of our new normal now. This is part of life, of waking up every day. And yeah, there's a chance that something could have happened in my environment while I was sleeping last night. There could have been something that either tried to breach my environment, which is very likely, or something actually did get inside my environment, which is not as likely, but it can happen. So every day when you come into the office, that you know that there's a possibility that something like this could happen. So I think it's a mindset shift of, these far-fetched media stories are popping up all over on the news. That's not going to happen to me. It shouldn't, because I've done all the right things. Well, the reality is, even if you've done all the right preventative measures, more than likely it will happen to you. It's more of how fast are you going to bounce back and how strong are your defenses that are in play. So it's a mindset shift of knowing that this is really the normal circumstance that we live in today. And the same thing can be said for regulatory. The regulatory pieces of cybersecurity in different industries are changing so frequently. It's impossible to stay on top of every single new announcement or new regulation every time it comes out. And I hear technical leaders say it all the time, that they know when they wake up in a given day, given week, that there could be new regulation out there that they have to go chase, but it's not keeping them up at night anymore. Same thing as cyber threats. It's part of our new normal, and you've got to accept that. And yeah, you've got to do the best you can to go counteract these things and fight them, but it's just part of your day-to-day now.
And typically regulations to me is behind the activity is what's really happening. And it's almost a distraction of paperwork you got to do. I mean, what they're trying to, it's like government is never on the bleeding edge of security risks, right? Things that are happening in the wild are way in front of anything that's hitting the regulatory or legislation, right? And the things that you're following in HIPAA and CMMC and all that, those are best practices and things like that. But if you're chasing that and that's all you care about, and you say, well, I checked that box, I'm safe, and there's no way. I mean, there's so much out there. When you talk to people that's having to deal with CMMC, ISO, HIPAA, all these different acronyms, and they're overwhelmed by, where do you kind of recommend they start when it talks to cyber risk or regulations or best practices, ITIL, ITSM, all these different, I was giving a conference, a session to my internal people on hardware asset management, software asset management. I called it ham and Sam.
Yep.
Next thing you know, it's green eggs and ham, Dr. Seuss. There's just so many acronyms nowadays. So where do you get people to start when it comes to security? What should they pay attention in the beginning and then kind of move towards?
Yeah. Well, let's not overthink this, and let's stay with the theme that I'm really preaching here during this episode is use your peers and use a sounding board. Use those folks around you who have been there and done that. My firm works with organizations that have to pay attention to CMMC and FedRAMP. And what we have learned together, my customers and I, is that the regulation is very, very difficult to interpret to the letter when you're actually reading the regulation on paper. Go to folks that have actually done this, been through an audit, and you can almost get the Cliff Notes version of what you need to do. And I'm not suggesting that there's shortcuts here. That's not what I'm saying. But I think a lot gets lost in the wording. And because it's so difficult to interpret, we can go by what's just said on paper. And all of a sudden, we've lost the common sense of checking in with people who have actually gone through the journey already and been through an audit. Because I've heard these conversations about CMMC, and somebody will start talking about it in the roundtable and say, well, I read that I need to do this. And somebody says, hold it right there, because I already did this. And that's not at all how the audit went. It actually went like this. And what you should be paying attention to is over here. So that's what I would say. Start with your peers. If you can't find one, use your network to connect you with somebody who's already gone through this.
And if you can't find that, you might start a roundtable.
Go ahead, Steve. Sorry.
I said, and if you can't find that, you have to start your own roundtable.
There you go. Now with you can stay alone or you talk with your friends, but you get more value talking to your parents and your grandparents, right? And see what they've gone through, right? It's sort of the same thing. You learn from other people and what they've lived through, and hardships, and why go through it yourself as well, right? Trying to learn from other,
It's much cheaper
it's much
to
cheaper.
learn from other people's mistakes. Yeah.
Can you share a favorite example of some simple automation or some AI that's made a surprising difference for a customer's IT or clinical team?
Yeah. Yeah. One that I've been talking quite a bit about with customers and I've been hearing folks working on is using AI to help with service desk tickets. This agentic AI concept, which I think is transforming the whole industry of IT right now. One of the use cases of agentic AI is around helping with the mundane, everyday questions that we don't need humans to answer.
Mhm.
We all are looking for ways to eliminate those simple requests, those tickets that get entered that just suck the life out of our IT teams. So what do we want as IT leaders? We all want to use our IT people, our technical people, for strategic projects, for higher level thinking, for things that they trained for, went to school for. We don't want them to have to, hey, how do I charge my laptop? Or, hey, I'm brand new and I don't have a monitor. Or, my Wi-Fi is out. Can you, help me troubleshoot this? These are the basic things that we don't want people and humans to have to answer. So agents, we can train agentic agents to essentially handle these low-level questions for us. And this is a game changer for those IT teams that are not well staffed. They don't have the people to handle both the mundane everyday questions and handle the strategic projects. All of a sudden, you've got some technology handling those service desk tickets, those basic ones that come in 3 times a day, and the productivity comes back over to the strategic side. So that's a big one that I've heard a lot of people working on.
Yeah, I've been looking at, I use ServiceNow a lot. And instead of having build a big ServiceNow portal and everything else and trying to drag all the users and say, hey, come over here, come to something new, log in. We're looking at making Teams being that entry point that they can just go into a Teams channel for support and just type in their human language, I need help with this. And then not building, because now all of our KB articles are technical based, right? They're there to help our IT people. They're there to help our service desk people. They're not really built to answer to the user a question or help the user. Instead of having to build a new KB article set, we're going to our training knowledge base, our training deck of QDRs. I think they're called QDRs, QCRs, QRCs, whatever they're called. All the
Some
training,
acronym.
yeah, some other acronym, all the training materials, and have that get answered through all that. So they ask these questions and training materials come to them. And if they get frustrated, they get that the registration gets, okay, let's open a ticket. And then not necessarily open an incident. It's most likely going to be a request, because most likely it's not really an incident. They need something, right? They need a new laptop. They need a monitor. They need a new keyboard. They need to know how to do this. They need a new software app, and then put them into a workflow. And don't just dump it. I call it volleyball. It's just ticket volleyball. Don't create a ticket. Just send it to a workflow that's already been predetermined on how it gets done. And then that's more effective for the user because it gets done instead of playing volleyball back and forth. So I love this agentic AI. I love AI, period. I don't want to go crazy with it to where I get too much at risk with it. I just want to answer business issues that we have today with as much automation as I can provide. And like you said, let the IT people do what they're paid to do, what they've educated themselves to do, and they're valued to do.
Yeah, think about those repeatable tasks. Think about
Exactly.
something as simple as a new hire, a new employee that needs to be onboarded. How many times do we do this? How
Mhm.
repeatable is that? Why should we not have some technology paving that path? 95% of cases are going to be very, very similar. So why should we have a human do all these basic things that we could put into a workflow and we could be, off and running with 80% of that workflow done before a human even touches it?
And
So
also, like in a workflow onboarding, how often do you have employees that didn't get their email, built on time, or their name was spelt wrong, or, something was done, human mistake was done. If you automate it, it's just going to get done timely and most likely done correctly and most likely, right? If the process is built correct, and you're going to look good to that new employee. The onboarding is just going to get done. You're going to look like you're organized. You're going to give your, best portrayal of a business to that new employee. They're going to have more faith in you, and they're going to have their first step, have trust in you. So I
It's
think
got to
these things
be
are good.
it's got to be outcome focused. Look at
Exactly.
the outcome of the example you just gave is that you have an end user who's more satisfied. So sure,
Exactly.
there's benefit to you internally as an IT organization who didn't have to touch that workflow and could hold your people to higher projects, and you didn't have to place folks towards that workflow. But also you have an end user who's now more satisfied. That's the outcome piece. That's what AI really needs to be focused on.
Exactly.
And I feel those are really good examples of how there's tangible value and it's not all hype. It might have started with the chatbot and then it started with getting questions and then it turned into workflows that were then providing value. And to your point, it's removing the repetitive, removing the mundane, and reallocating that time towards the strategic, which is where folks need to be. Instead of spending all the time trying to automate the process, which might not be that great, how can we make the process better and then automate that? And that transition over to the strategic work, I think is where value is. So I love that call out that you had earlier.
So have you been advising leaders who want AI in their stack and are nervous about data exposure, the model risk, and vendor claims?
Yeah, I certainly have, Brian. There's been a fair amount of that. And as I said, the conversation about AI is so wide ranging. There's folks who have been working with it for years, and there's IT professionals who are brand new to it and are wondering how to get started with it and what's the most responsible way to get started. The way I'm advising these guys to start is one of the call outs that I had earlier on creating some governance around this and wrapping your arms around it with some form of written policy, some kind of document that gives direction to folks. The reality is that your folks are going to be using some form of AI, whether you know it or not. Whether you want to admit it or not, folks are going out into ChatGPT or Claude or other applications for language AI. It's just where we're at. So if you don't wrap your arms around this and get out in front of it, you're going to be behind it. So I preach the message of leading from the front, and you'd rather be proactive on this front rather than trying to clean up messes later. Of course, what we don't want to see happen is sensitive info or things, proprietary info to organizations that get shared out into these tools. So that's the entire point of pushing into a document, pushing into direction from the start.
For someone listening who doesn't have access to a formal roundtable, can't go to the conference, how would they build their own kitchen cabinet, so to speak, of trusted peers and advisors in IT? What would you recommend?
Yeah, that's a good question, Steele. And I've had some folks ask this question. Their day-to-day doesn't allow for a roundtable. They don't have the budget or the support from their organization to go out and travel and get to conferences. One common platform that we all have access to, and it doesn't cost anything, is LinkedIn. There's a lot of different ways that folks are using LinkedIn today, but I think the magic in this network is that it is a professional network of folks that are right at your fingertips. And with a few clicks and searches, you can find folks that are in your same industry, in a similar position, that are very easy to reach out to. I think a lot of folks are a little intimidated by LinkedIn or see it as a form of social media and something that they don't see themselves associating with. When in reality, all it is a tool. And it's a tool that does have a sense of community if you use it the right way. So I'm not even saying you need to go out and start your own LinkedIn group and start inviting other folks to your group and create a massive community. Maybe you go out there and you find 5 new connections that are also IT directors that are in the law firm space or that are manufacturers and their organizations of similar size and stature. That can get you off and running. And all of a sudden you're sharing ideas with a couple of professionals that are like-minded rather than trying to build a roundtable from scratch. That does take time.
Yeah. I feel like that is a muscle, especially if you're introverted or an introverted leader. It definitely takes time to grow and develop, but the tool is there. And that's a really good point. We have the technology. Let's use it. I think this. Let's see if we can get something controversial here. What's one belief about IT leadership or cybersecurity that you hold strongly that you think more people in the industry may push back on, and why do you hold it?
Yeah, it's a good question, Steele. You know, one of the things that I think is important, and I do get challenged on this from time to time, is that in order for technology to really be adopted inside of an organization, a brand new emerging technology, and we'll use AI as that example, you know, who needs to be the most familiar with it? Should it be the folks that are really using it on the front lines? Or, as I like to say, I think the leaders of the organization need to be familiar with the technology first. I'm a big believer in top-down leadership styles, and I'm a big believer in getting buy-in from leadership before pushing new ideas. I have seen ideas fall flat, great ideas, great initiatives that have a lot of momentum, but when there's trepidation or there's a lack of leadership or a lack of example coming from folks from above, all of a sudden I see these things lose steam and they die even when they shouldn't. Oftentimes we're so eager to implement that we jump right to the people that are going to use it, but we don't think about the level above us and their level of understanding of the tool or the technology. And if that piece is a gap, if that leadership level doesn't have that understanding in that tool, then guess what? When these lower level folks, these users start asking questions or want support or start to share what they're spending their time on, and there isn't that support from above or there isn't that understanding from above, all of a sudden there's going to be some downward pressure that doesn't feel so good, and it's not going to feel like support. So I hold true to new ideas, new technology, something emerging within an organization. I think there needs to be a comfort level established at the top. Once you have that buy-in, I think it's incredibly powerful for the rest of the organization.
Michael, thanks again for jumping into the garage with us and sharing what you're seeing across your IT leadership roundtables and in healthcare. For everyone listening, if this conversation helped you think differently about how you lead your team, share this episode with someone who needs it and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what's coming next. Thanks again for joining the Wire Garage with Pops.
Cheers.
Thanks for having me.